So when she sent me that song, the first thing I had to ask myself was, which one of those two people did I identify with? And I ask you to look at that. Are you the boy child outside the door, seemingly having nothing? Or are you the woman inside who opens the door to share her home, but also to share in this thing called love and giving? Or are you both, which kind of is where I landed. And it made me think about my own childhood growing up and my youth. And at this time of year, I tend to go back and look at the Christmases past. Do you do that? You just go back and think about all the Christmases you've lived. And I've loved our candlelight service where all the ministers shared that, and we had Christmas Eve service. How many of you were able to watch our Christmas Eve service? Just a couple. So most of our ministers talked about their Christmas Eves, and I shared about some of mine too. But it's interesting because as a young actor growing up in New York City, there were Christmases that I was very wealthy. And then there were Christmases where I was really poor. And they could be Christmases one after the other. And I think about the Christmas of West Side Story, when I was doing West Side Story on Broadway. That was a very full, beautiful, rich Christmas. The very next year, being a young 25-year-old actor who thought, I should spend all the money I made, the following Christmas was not. Right in the next Christmas. And that Christmas, actually, I was literally so poor, I didn't even have the money to go home for Christmas. And I shared this on Christmas Eve in Westlake. I had Christmas with friends in my apartment, and I had a big 9-room apartment in New York City. Can you imagine? But it was on the Upper West Side. It was on the above 72nd Street, which no one lived if they cared about their life. But we found this 9-room apartment on 87th and Amsterdam, a bunch of actors, and we took it. And it was 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, living room, dining room, kitchen, maid's room. I don't know who had a maid up there, but maid's room. And it was just an amazing apartment. So some of us that stayed home had Christmas there. And we all went to bed really we didn't have gifts for one another. We really had no money. And so my friend Robin, who passed from COVID this year, she stayed up all night for me and cut things out of magazines, put them in envelopes with my name on them, and filled the tree with envelopes with all these gifts. And when I woke up the next morning, she was still giddy, just sitting there, and she was like, "Come see your presents." I was like, "What?" She said, open the envelopes. And I would open each envelope and, a red convertible. And she was like, and so we just played together. And I was like, "Oh my God." And I got all these great coats. I even got this big fur coat. It was like I had this amazing array of gifts all around me. And I remember Robin saying to me, which reminds me of that old lady in the story, Robin saying to me, "If I had money, I'd give you all of this. That's how much I love you." And frankly, the presents themselves couldn't have meant more than what that Christmas felt like. And it was a very full, rich Christmas. Then fast forward to a few years later, and I was starring in 42nd Street and making more money than anyone in my family had ever made. And so excited that I could go back to Philadelphia on Christmas, because we got that weekend off, go back to Philadelphia with, so many presents. And it was a weird Christmas. I went back because my family was very thrifty. Let's use that word. They were very thrifty. And a lot of them were very intimidated by the success I was having. And I remember on Christmas night, I came down to open, we used to open presents on Christmas Eve. And I came down and I had this floor-length, picture this floor-length white robe with a big collar that said 42nd Street. And then on the back had my name, which David Barrick had given the stars of the show. And I came downstairs, and I never forget the look on all their faces. They were like, what are you wearing? I was like, it's my show robe. And I came down and I had all these presents. It was a different kind of Christmas for me that year. It was more exciting, the Christmas when I had to open envelopes. And this one felt a little awkward. But it really started me thinking about this thing called prosperity and richness and where it all comes from. So the title of my talk today is An Abundance of Riches. I'm going to ask you today as we go through this time together, I consider this talk to be a very intimate, personal talk with all of us individually, to ask yourselves, how much richness is in your life? How much do you have? That song brings it up so beautifully, so perfectly for me. Do you give what you have to give? Or are you worried? Do you hold on to it? Are you afraid to give because somehow you think you won't have enough? That little boy in that song shows that, as you give, you receive. And that there is so much more to get out of life when you realize that you're the one giving it. That you're not just trying to get what is yours, but you're here to give what is yours to give. So driving here this morning, we had a beautiful Christmas. We did go see West Side Story last night, which was cathartic and beautiful all at once. I did have a moment when Riff got stabbed. I literally gasped, just remembering that knife going in me for 300 or so performances. And Kevin's sitting next to me. I must have scared him to death because I was like, ah! And I could hear his mind going, you're not being stabbed. But it was quite cathartic for me. So we didn't get to bed till very late, and we had about 4 or 5 hours sleep, and then we got up and drove here, or Kevin got up and drove me here. But as we passed the darkness and came towards the mountains, I'm going to cry. The little bit of yellow sun started to come up over here on the right. And it showed hovering clouds and mountains with snow caps. It was so beautiful. And I thought to myself, I could be sitting here complaining that I am driving at 5:30 in the morning on the day after Christmas. And if I were complaining about that, I'd miss this. I would not see this. I would not have the capacity to see it. I'd be too busy being in my mind, thinking about relative facts that I might want to be different. And frankly, I don't. As I told you all, I came to this center every summer with my daughter. Kevin and Will usually stayed back at the not Rancho Mirage, what's it called? Desert Willow. And but Nora and I came here. And on the Sundays I had to go into LA. She would get up with me at the crack of dawn and we would drive into LA together and watch the sunrise. This was our 4th Christmas without our daughter. And so there are moments that are both sad and yet fulfilling. So we're looking at this whole landscape, and Kevin reminded me of something I said to him a couple days ago. And it was in relationship to our daughter. And he had tears in his eyes, and we both have them occasionally. Something comes up and we think about her, especially during the holidays. And I said to him, you know what, Kevin? I have chosen to focus on what we have in life and not what we've lost in life. I said, and it's my way of understanding how to live this philosophy, how to live this teaching. To focus on what we have and not be so occupied with what we have lost, because what we have lost is never lost. We still have it, because in terms of the quantum understanding of life, it's right here. It's right where I am. My daughter will always be as close as my next thought. And that is very important to me. And so the gift that I want to give at the end of this year, and this has been quite a year, is for all of us to ask ourselves, what do I have? What do I have? Forget about what you think you've lost. You may think you've lost your youth. Anybody? But have you? I'm watching these guys yesterday in West Side Story. They're dancing and snapping their fingers and triple pirouettes and all. And I'm sitting there going, I did all that. I've been there, done that. Have the knees to prove it. But you know what? There was something inside of me that was like, and when I got home, Will said, Dad, they're dancing. Did you see how amazing their dancing was? And I was like, I did that choreography. Actually, harder choreography than they did in the movie, because Jerome Robbins was a tormentor as a choreographer. I said, but I used to do that. And he goes, it's just so hard for me to visualize you doing all of that. I said, you should call my Uncle Al. The two of you should have dinner. Long story. You know that story because I told it here, not there. Yes. So I said, Will, I could still do that today if I wanted to. And he said, we had a really good conversation about it. He was like, do you really think you could still do that? And I went, you know what? Yes. I actually believe I could do that once. Then I'd have to have some surgery, probably. No, but I seriously mean that. Could I still do that dancing? Yes, I could do a lot of it. But do I have to? I mean, do I have to prove that to myself or to my son? I said, first of all, go to Lincoln Center, watch me do it. Yes, I was 25 when that happened, and I'm 67 now. But yeah. So for me, it's about what do I have today, not what did I have? Who did I used to be? This whole idea of I'd like to reclaim all of that. You know what? It's not lost. You don't have to reclaim it. You just have to be it today. Because guess what? You are it. You are all of it as this today. And it's amazing. Last week in Los Angeles, my practitioner of the day gave me a book, and it was about aging, and it was about getting old. And I thought the themes coming at me these days are really quite compelling. How to grow old gracefully. And I was like, do I really want to grow old gracefully? I'd rather just not grow old. Anybody want to join me there? There's no reason to grow old. So why do I have to do it gracefully? I'm probably going to be just as ungraceful in my 80s as I was in my 20s. Only I'll be aware of it. I'll be awakened to it. And probably Dr. Laura or Reverend Dr. Dale by that point will be able to point it out to me. And those things are fine. So I have a quote from Wayne Dyer, and he says this: doing what you love is the cornerstone of having abundance in your life. Doing what you love is the cornerstone of having abundance in your life. So an abundance of riches. Every single one of you is an abundance of riches. And I don't care how much yeah buts you can throw at me. Yeah, but blah, 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 blah. You ever do that to people? I know you do. We all do. It's like, yeah, I am rich, but and it's like, nah, I don't want the but. I don't want the but. I just want, where are your riches? Where are you rich, Pat? And I know you are rich in so many different ways. And it's not just about money. It's about love. Are you rich in love? As Wayne Dyer says, doing what you love is the cornerstone of having abundance in your life. So it's important to ask ourselves, as this year ends, am I doing what I love? Driving here this morning at 5:30 in the morning, we're doing what we love. We really are. Looking at that sunrise and seeing those snow-capped mountains, and frankly, when I got here and I was sitting in my office back there, and I realized what a gift you all have given me. People are always like, thank you for coming. I'm like, thank you for having me. Thank you for saying yes to me getting to come here. No, really. And thank you to Dr. Joe for offering me this opportunity. And I sat in that office and I was like, oh my God, an abundance of riches? I am one of the richest men in the world. I have everything I could possibly want. And I could say, yeah, but my daughter passed away. Well, yes, she did. Does that mean I am less rich because of that? Then I'm denying all the richness she brought to me for 19 years, which is right here in me, right, Kevin? We live with it every day, and that's who she is and will always be. So when we say an abundance of riches, we have to be willing to say all of it and no buts. So I ask you today to really look at your life and ask yourself, how rich am I? Just how rich am I? Mark Twain said this: if you want love and abundance in your life, do you all? Don't you all want love in your life, more abundance in your life? He says, if you want love and abundance in your life, give it away. Give it away. I'm on a chain, a text chain that it's actually a messenger chain on Facebook that with West Side Story, with all of the cast members from the 1980, the first revival that they did. And, there's all this talk about the show and they're all giving their opinions and all, but I knew I was seeing it on Christmas night. And I have to say, I have a whole new perspective to my life about what I've done, what I've accomplished. And last night was such a marvelous Christmas night. We came back from the movie and we had all that conversation about the show and all. And then Will was looking for a chord in a song he was writing. He had written this gorgeous song, lyrics, and he came back to play the piano to try to figure out a melody, and he couldn't find a chord. And he said, Dad, could you find this chord for me? And I came over to the piano, and I sat down, and not only did I find the chord, but I started writing another section, and we did it together. And when we finished the song, it was so gorgeous. And all I could think of was the last thing I did with Nora was sit at the piano with her while she was playing me her song that she'd just written. And then she was in a car accident an hour later. And Will was sitting there, and we finished this song, and my heart just opened wide, because the lyrics, when I got halfway through fixing the chord for him, I realized the lyrics were about Nora. And it was just so beautiful. And we must have worked at it for half hour, 45 minutes, and the whole song just unraveled. That's an abundance of riches. If you get out of the way. Now, I could have just been in a bad mood or a sad mood, but I wasn't. I was in a creative mood. I was like, yeah, here's a chord. And then music took me to a whole new place. So what in your life are you going to allow you to take you to that richness of life? Knowing what is rich in our lives, knowing what we have is where we begin. So let's look back at our lives. I'm going to ask you a question, which will be surprising that I'm going to ask you this question. What is your biggest failure in life? Just think about it. Don't tell us, unless you want to. But no, you don't have to yell it out. But what's your biggest failure in life? When you look at your life, what do you look back at and think, that was a huge failure? That was a failure for me. I just want you to think about it for a minute, whatever that was. Do you know that one of the things I thought of as one of the biggest failures in my life was West Side Story, was the way I behaved back then, who I was as an actor, and the fact that I did not take what was mine, what I could have gotten out of that experience. I was too busy complaining and not happy with so much of it. And I saw it as a failure. So whatever yours is, just take it there and look at it for a moment. And then I want you to ask yourself, was it really a failure? Whatever it was, maybe it's a marriage, maybe it's a choice you made, maybe you were fired from a job, whatever. The biggest failure in your life, was it? Or was perhaps whatever that failure you perceived was it maybe just something that needed you to experience it in order to get you where you are today? Every single one of them, truly. But as we reflect at the end of this year, I thought the biggest failure in your life would be a good place to go. What is it? What was it? I'd never consider marriages that end failures. They're not. Two people come together in love, and something shifts and changes, and they're smart enough to know it's time to move on in different directions in order to grow bigger, better, more fulfilling lives. That's not a failure. That's just an ending. Things end and begin simultaneously. So these are important things for us. Imagine if you could take every failure you've ever had and just put it to bed. Just be done with it. How would that feel? Who would like to do that? Well, do it. It's like Bob Newhart. Stop it. Do it. So it's all about perspective, isn't it? It really is perspective when you look back at all of this. Ernest Holmes said, never limit your view of life by any past experience. Never limit your view of life, certainly as the forward momentum of life, by any past experience. So I was in Ralph's shopping, and there was a magazine of West Side Story. And I never buy that. How many people buy the magazines when they're in the grocery store? We're so evolved. But I bought this one. So it was a West Side Story, and it had Natalie Wood and Richard Boehmer on the cover, and it was talking about, the new movie, and I thought, yeah, I'll buy it. It looks like fun. And when I opened it, I'm looking through it, and there was a page with the guy playing Riff, who's just terrific in the movie. And it said on the top of it, it said, all the stars who have played Riff. And then there were sheets. It was like all the stars who had played Tony, all the stars who had played. And I thought, oh, that's sweet. And I started to read, and I was like, Michael Callan, who was the original Riff, and then George Chakiris, who actually played Riff in London. And then there was Russ Tamlin, who played it in the 1961 movie. And then it was my name. I was like, imagine you're standing in Ralph's. And you're in People magazine. And it said, James J. Mellon. And I was like, I just got, first of all, I went back and read it. It said, all the stars who have played this role. I was like, yeah, I was a Broadway star. And, And it just really struck me funny. And I brought it home and I showed it to Kevin, and Kevin was like so excited. And I showed it to Will, and Will was like, give me that. And he's on the phone showing his friends the pictures. And it's just my name. It's not even a picture of me, but it's my name. And I got very excited. And I was like, and yet I consider that such a dark moment in my life. But here I am 42 years later, and it's still playing in my mind. So then I did what most people do, and I Googled myself. I did. I went in and Googled James Mellon, West Side Story, and up comes all these reviews and articles, and I went back and read some of the reviews, and I was like, okay, I guess it wasn't that big a failure. And then there was an article in The Advocate. Do you all know what The Advocate is? It's a gay newspaper. And they had done a feature story on me, and I'd completely forgotten about that. And they showed it again in 2003, which totally I was oblivious to. And it talked about this. Anyway, it was very complimentary. But more importantly, it was a story about me coming out as a gay actor in 2003, in 1980. Saying that I was one of the first professional dancers who was starring in a Broadway show who came out as gay. And I'm reading this going, I did? I don't remember doing that. In fact, I was engaged after that a few times, still trying to play the game. I was like, but I did. And I looked at it, and I was like, so many things that have happened in my life, I don't remember. They're there in the zeitgeist. They're there in the collective consciousness. So I thought, if that's true for me, that has to be true for you. All these things that you have somehow done in the life you have lived, and not the failures, the successes and the failures, all of it that makes you who you are today. You know what it makes you more than anything else? Rich. Absolutely rich. Layered, rich, complicated. How many times have you thought of yourself as complicated? How many people here would say they're complicated? If you don't know that you're complicated, keep looking. Every one of us is complicated. And that's a good thing. We should be complicated. Do you know what you're really going to be doing in 2022? No, you don't. You may think you do, and I'd like to suggest you stop thinking you do. That you start thinking, I'm open to the adventure of a lifetime. Whatever it is, wherever it takes me, whoever comes along with it, whatever is going to bring me to even a much more rich experience of life, bring it on. Who would like that for the new year? Yes, bring it on. And you know what? You guys do musicals out here. I could still play riff in this group. Totally. So maybe I'll get Michael Hadley to put a senior version of West Side Story together. Except, you know what? No. I will play Tony. I've been the second banana long enough in that show. So, I would like you to take some time this week before we move into Friday's New Year's Eve ceremony. And I hope you join us here for the Burning Bowl ceremony on Friday evening. Take some time this week. Look at your life. Look at your memories. Look at your failures. Look at your successes. Look at it from a distance. Look at it from this impersonal place of going, yeah, I did that. Yep, I did that. And that happened to me in my life. And this experience happened. I was married to this person for a while. It was good for a while. Then I smartly knew to move on. Whatever it is that will help you to really come to terms with who you truly are. You are the active energy that created all of it. And you're right here, as Ernest Holmes says, never limit your view of life by any past experience because you are currently creating your life. You are an abundance of riches. And you have an open checkbook to pay for whatever you want in your life, but the payment is mental. It is mental coinage. When you know who you are, you can afford anything. And I am going to work this year at all of our prosperity consciousnesses to really get it, that we live in a prosperous universe, and we are at the center of an abundance of riches. And there's an expression called an embarrassment of riches. And it's interesting because I thought, do I want to do a talk on the embarrassment of riches? Because then I'm really going to have to talk about what are we so embarrassed about? What is it I'm embarrassed about if I'm an embarrassment of riches? Because you know what? That's how I felt going home for Christmas during 42nd Street. I was a little bit embarrassed that I had all of this success and all of this money, and I went back where they didn't have that much success, and most of them were still in the same jobs they've been in for the last 30 years that they didn't like when they first got. Yet I'm out there living what I want to be living. And I learned from Ernest Holmes when he told that story about driving up to the Wilshire Theater in a Cadillac, and his administrator, Elizabeth would never say this to me, but his administrator said, Ernest, you need to put the car in the back because I think people will be a little bit upset when they see how successful you are. And he said, it's exactly why I'm parking it in the front. Because no one should ever feel less than because others have. They should be able to point to that person, of course this is before it happened, and say, I'll have what she's having. I'll have what he's having. And I hope to always be the person that you can point to and say, I'll have what he's having, because I expect to have an amazing life continuing from this moment onward. Will said to me last night, he said, Dad, he said, here's what I think. We were talking about something. I had to run to the car. And I was like, whew, that was a run. He goes, yeah, it's tiring now, isn't it? And I was like, no, it's not tiring now. He said, no, I mean, it gets tiring as you get older. I said, no, it doesn't. He said, you're right. I think you're the kind of person, you're going to just be energetic and then you're going to die. And I said, I'm good with that. I would like to be, and I'm going to be the Energizer Bunny. I'm going to just keep going and going and going, not running out of gas, by the way, or not burning myself out, but going and going and going and creating and dancing and singing and speaking and acting and counseling and loving and creating and just going, and then I'll look up, I'll see the sunset and go, and curtain. Namaste.